Hello, everybody, and welcome to our December webinar long arm project with Donna Bolars. I have a couple of things before we start. If you have any questions for the presenter, you can type into the questions box. We will have a questions session at the end. Don't worry, the webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on BERNINA.com and YouTube next week. If you are viewing on an Apple product, there's one handout for today, and it can be found in the lower right side of your screen. If the main window doesn't pop up, you can just swipe left or right to see the other window. And then if you experience audio or visual issues once the webinar begins, please follow these steps. You can exit the webinar. You can close your internet browser, you can relaunch your internet browser, and then re-enter the webinar. And like I said, do not worry because the webinar is being recorded and an email will be sent once the recording is done. And with that being said, I now present you Donna.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Actually, I can't really see you, but we're going to have some fun this morning. We're going to be talking about ruler work, and my name is Donna Bolars. I'm a BERNINA educator. I'm a quilting and long arm specialist, and there is my email address. You're going to get an opportunity to ask questions at the end of this presentation. So you can be sure to type those in for Randy. And I'm also going to be showing a little 2-minute video at the end of this presentation, which is a ruler work demonstration. So just to give you a little heads up on that. So today we are talking about ruler work. And for whatever reason, my slide will not allow me to go forward. Are you able to see me, Randy? There we go.
Yes,
okay.
It's working, Donna.
All right, so let's talk about ruler work today. The focus obviously is going to be on the Q series, but everything I talk about today can also be translated to your domestic machine. It could also be on a frame machine. So we're going to talk, when I talk today, I will talk primarily from the BERNINA Q series standpoint. So some of the great features are we have 2 stitch regulators, 2 built-in stitch regulators. So that means when I'm doing ruler work, I get regulated stitches, the same as if I were doing work free motion with a stitch regulator. I have 3 different stitch regulation modes to choose from. I use a regular sewing machine needle. So for any of you who are in the long arm world, that is a big deal, right? When you put the needle in, it's a flat back needle, so it slides in real nice and easy and perfectly aligned every time. There's a real easy threading path at the front of the machine, so I don't have to go to the back and thread to the front. It's all right there in the front, very simple and easy. It does wind its own bobbins, so there's a bobbin winder on there, and it uses the large M-class bobbins, which is the largest long arm bobbin there is. If I do need to play with my upper thread tension, which we frequently have to do in free motion quilting because we have to take in consideration what is the fabric we're stitching on, what is the thread we're using, and what is it we're trying to do. Are we a fast mover, a slow mover? Are we doing ruler work? And the BERNINA Q series does have a programmable foot control. So just like the domestic, it is programmable to do several different things, one of which you could stitch without having to have your foot on the foot control. Fabulous feature. We aren't going to use it in ruler work, but I wanted you to know it's there. So here is a slide that shows all of the feet that are compatible between the BERNINA domestic machine and the long arm, whether it is a sit down or the stand-up model. So you can see all of these feet have a spring, and that hopping mechanism is what allows them to go between the 2 machines. So we have to have accessories, right? If we're going to do ruler work, well, we need rulers and we need the right foot. So I'm just going to go over the feet options that are available for you. The first one is the 96 foot. It is only for use on the Q series, and if you look at it, you can see that there is no spring on this foot. So this foot is not interchangeable. Wonderful foot, and if you are on the frame and you do edge-to-edge quilting, the cup clip that's on there right now is a must-have. So wonderful ruler work foot. Bernina has a second foot called the adjustable ruler foot number 72. And I've got two markings here. There's a gold dial on the top, which allows you to raise and lower the foot depending on the thickness of your batting and your backing and your top. So you want to bring that down low enough that it's almost touching, but not so low that you're dragging as you're pushing. The foot has a notch in the front to allow you a clean sight to your needle. And you can see on this slide there are a few markings, and those markings are really helpful when you're doing ruler work because you can see if you're lining up with a seam line or if you're lining up with a mark that is on your quilt or a mark that's on the ruler. Then Bernina came out with a new version of the 72 foot, and it's called 72S. So it's the same as the 72, but they added a slit. And you can see by my slide here that there's a little red arrow that shows where the slit is. And that's really super helpful because I can easily bring my upper threads, through the slit into the back. So I have complete control of my upper threads. And when I'm doing ruler work, I frequently combine it with free motion. So if I stop in the needle down position and raise my presser foot, I can slide this foot off and I can slide on a free motion foot and continue stitching without having to stop and cut my threads and start again. That to me is really great. So the 72S, I love that foot. And this is the partner foot that I like to use with it, the 73, which is an open toe stipple foot. It's got a big open area, so you get perfect visibility. It has the same dial. It is also a matte finish, so it doesn't reflect back at you. Love going between free motion and ruler work. And so I just wanted to show you that. These are my two favorite feet. There are a few extra accessories that can take the 72 or 72S foot one step further. So if you want to play with couching, there are 3 couching inserts, and those are those little silver discs you see on the slide. And they have different size holes so that when you put your thread or your cording down through, you just pick the size that matches, you pick the disc that matches the thickness of the thread you're using. So that's really fun and helpful, and I'm going to show you a slide of that coming up here. And the other 3 are round discs. They are called Echo quilt clips, and they slide on the bottom of the foot. And you can see by looking at the photo right there that the largest one is on the bottom of the 72 foot. And you can push that tight up against a ruler you already have on your quilt and extend the echoes. Or you could just use the Echo quilt clip without a ruler, and then as shown in that purple quilt, you could just follow the outside edge of a previously stitched line. So here is what it looks like using the clamshell, and it is a 72 foot with a couching insert and then red cording being fed down through the top. And then we're just sewing like normal sewing with a ruler. So that is one option. And then in this photo, Haley is actually stitching on a domestic Bernina machine, and she's using the Bernina straight edge ruler, and she has the 72 foot with the large disc on. And that just gives her additional spacing while not moving the ruler. So there are really creative ways to take your ruler work a step further. Now, if you happen to be working on a frame, you will need one thing that a domestic machine owner or a sit-down owner does not need, and that is a Rulerwork base. That base has to pop onto the top of the machine, and it supports the ruler so that it doesn't tip up and you would accidentally strike the ruler with your foot. So let's get started. What is Rulerwork? Well, it's the use of 1/4-inch rulers to create quilting designs. And I say 1/4 inch, some are 3/8 of an inch. We are not talking about rotary cutting rulers. We are talking specifically about long arm rulers, also known as templates. So if you hear someone talking about quilting templates, ruler and template is an interchangeable word. Again, we cannot do that with rotary cutting rulers. They're too thin and they will slide under your foot and you'll strike it with your needle. The 2 sets of rulers you see here are BERNINA's original sets of rulers. One was made specifically for the sit down and one was made specifically for the frame. There really is no such thing as frame only rulers and sit down only rulers or domestic machine only rulers. The only thing I would say is if a ruler is quite large, if depending on the throat space of your machine, you might have difficulty using it in a domestic setting, but these rulers are completely interchangeable. So those were BERNINA's original 2 sets of rulers, and this summer they came out with 3 new sets, and so they should be available. If they're not there now, they will be shortly at your dealer. The first one is the Borders Ruler Kit. I love this set. The hearts ruler is very simple to use. There are 4 different size hearts. The cable ruler happens to be the ruler that I'm going to be showing the video at the end. I really enjoy that ruler. It looks complicated, but for me, very easy. You have pointed leaf and ovals, and you have a loop to loop. The middle set is curves and clams. And so the clamshell ruler, I think that that is a fantastic ruler because it has a lot of space for your hand to control it. And it's got 4 different size of clamshells around the outside edge of that ruler. The nested mini ovals, you're also going to see that in an upcoming slide here. I really enjoy using those. The S-curve, for me, there are never enough curves and circles and arcs to choose from, you know, depending on the block that you are trying to do ruler work in. If you're trying to go corner to corner or edge to edge, just finding the right size. It also makes a great flower. The squiggle is great, love that. And then the Essentials Ruler Kit. That's a must-have kit because, as I just mentioned, circles, arcs, and curves are very important. And so having a wide variety to choose from is really it's a good bang for your buck if you are doing ruler work. So the nested circles is a must-have. Straight edge, everything starts with a straight edge, right? We're going to do stitch in the ditch or corner to corner. So it's an excellent ruler. Your multi-curve ruler is great because we have inner curves, we have outer curves, we have one end that we could possibly use as a clamshell. So that has a lot of arcs that might be a lot more subtle. And the waves I love that soft undulating wave, and it can be used and combined in cabling. So great sets of rulers. Christmas is coming. Why do we like to do ruler work? Well, many women find it easier than free motion quilting. It helps quilters quilt consistent shapes. It helps you be more confident. There are lots of shapes available, and it can be combined with free motion. So the combination of the 2 is my favorite. And I'm going to show you just a couple of examples. This is primarily ruler work, this table runner here. The stars in the corner blocks, the cornerstones, were combined with free motion on the outside. There is free motion in the spider web looking green blocks. And then the long, next to the big dark triangles, those are actually clamshells with free motion in between. So here are two other examples. The example on the left, the multicolored blocks, is a sampler of using different kinds of rulers. So you can see how you can create floral shapes, circular shapes, and the left-hand side is a combination of straight edge ruler work and free motion. The quilt on the right is actually quite striking. It has very minimal quilting, nothing but a straight line ruler. It was a knockout when it was done, and it was nothing more than just straight lines on a ruler. Very, very simple and easy. And this photo, I really like the combination of this because on the left, you're looking at the back of an Amanda Murphy table panel that I had done. And it's about 80% ruler work, primarily straight edge ruler. I used her daisy ruler in there and some circles and some arcs. And I really like how it looks. And I also like how it really looks on the right, which is a baby quilt with, again, just nothing but straight edge ruler work, 1/4 inch away from the seam line. So it really helps you finish. So let's talk about the different kinds of rulers that are available to you. Some rulers can be used both on the inside and the outside of the edge, like nesting circles, for example. You have the inside and the outside you could use. Some rulers are meant to be used on the inside edge and they come with a key. And I'm going to show you that in an upcoming slide. The key has to be turned or removed in order for you to get your foot in or to complete the design without a break in the ruler. Some rulers are specific to one shape only. Some rulers can be flipped or need to be flipped in order to finish a design, and I'll show you one of those. Some rulers are meant to be used creatively and accomplish multiple design elements. So again, anything with a curve would be an example of that. So here we have two different circles. On the left, we have Amanda Murphy's, one of her good measure circle rulers, and you can see that I could use the inside or the outside edge. On the right, we have the BERNINA nested rulers. And again, there's many different options. You can use the inside of a circle or the outside. Here is an example of using rulers with a key. On the left, we have the Amanda Murphy Good Measure Lollipop ruler. And you can see that the key can come out and you could stitch partway down the channel, and that is what creates the lines between the circles. But you have to figure out where the circle is going to be, and I usually always tape it in place. The photo on the right shows nested circles and nested ovals from BERNINA. And BERNINA, the first two original sets of rulers, when you purchase them, they have a white film on the back that you can just peel off. And so it hasn't been peeled off in this photo, and that's why you're seeing it. And then there's a key, that crisscross looking kind of piece that is off to the side. As you remove the inner circles, that key twists and pops back in order to complete the inner oval of that ruler. So we're only sewing on the inside part of these rulers, the circles, the ovals, and the lollipop. And here is a photo of me using the nested ovals. You can see I took out the inner two rings and I had to turn the key and I taped it in place with painter's tape in order to keep the ruler as a complete set. Here is another photo of a ruler where you use only the inside portion of the ruler. And this photo happens to be taken on a BERNINA domestic sewing machine. And I have two slides for this. I'll show you the next one in just a moment. This is an example of using a ruler where you have to do one side of the shape and then flip the ruler to do the other side. So in this case, I have the heart ruler, and I'm going to sew the left-hand side first and then the right-hand side. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here I put a circle around it, and I did mark the center of my square, and I used a small heart and a large heart. So this is an example of a ruler where you are using the ruler, you stitch half, you have to flip the ruler and use the other half. I did a comparison for you. The top is the Bernina New Heart ruler, which as you can see has 4 different sizes. And below I have one of Amanda Murphy's Good Measure rulers. Instead of flipping her ruler, in this case you would sew the left or the right hand side first, and then you would position the ruler to stitch the other side. So there are many different ways that people who make rulers figure out how to create a shape. And so some rulers give you both sides and some you have to flip. The next ruler I want to talk about is the Bernina cable ruler. This particular ruler uses the top of the ruler and the bottom of the ruler, and then it has to be rotated one more time in order to accomplish the rest of the design. So in this photo, you can see I've finished my ovals in the background, and here I am lining up the white dashed line that you see on my drawn line, and that helps keep my orientation proper. So I would be sewing the bottom of the ruler first, the top of the ruler second, and then turning the ruler for one more pass. And again, I will show that in a short video clip at the end of this presentation. And this is what it looks like on your quilt. I really enjoy it. It's fun, it's interesting, and I will again show you a little video on how that works later. Here's an example of a ruler for a specific use. It's Amanda Murphy's ribbon candy ruler, and I like to use rulers for lots of different things, figure out how I can use them, and this is one that I just used for ribbon candy, so that's what I bought it for. And she was very generous and gives us 4 different sizes in the package, depending on the size you need. So this is a specific use ruler, as is this set, which is her every star set. And I'm going to show you a photo here. Here's an example of a sampler I did that uses the star, 2 different sizes of her star, and sometimes using a shape within an open area creates additional design elements. I really like surprising an empty area on my quilt with a shape and then filling in around it. So let's take a close look at Bernina's new clamshell ruler. It looks like a little amoeba to me, or like Ghostbusters is what I always think of when I see that. You can see that there are 4 different sizes: 4-inch, 3-inch, 2-inch, and 1-inch clamshell. And those little round blips in the corner are there to help stop your foot. So when you come to the end of one, you realign your foot. So here in this this small table runner that I did, you can see that I have the dotted red and white dashed line lined up with my seam line, and I'm simply stitching around the clam, repositioning my ruler, and finishing. In this, I didn't plan it this way, but 2 clamshells finished it. I wanted a little extra on each end, so I just turned my clamshell ruler and did a 2-inch clam on each end. Now, on my table runner that I showed you earlier, I did do free motion quilting in the little secondary design, that diamond that shows up there. So you have the opportunity to switch back and forth. So let's talk about markings on the rulers. I'm sure when you were looking at some of the photos, you're wondering, why are there so many black marks on some and hardly none on others? There's a reason for that. In this slide, I'm showing you a drawn version of the Bernina ruler set, and you can see that there are a lot of markings on it. In real life, when you look at the ruler, you're not obstructed by lots of different black lines and seam lines and things like that. So it is really nice in that gives you a lot of opportunity to see what you're doing and where you're going. But you have to have some marks on a ruler. If you don't have marks, you're going to have to create some. So rulers that don't have a lot of markings on really free up your imagination for their use. Some rulers, like this example right here, have a lot of markings on. And so if you're able to look at rulers like this, and the more you do ruler work, the easier it will get for you. You can see that there are a lot of dashed lines, black dashed lines, horizontal and vertical, as well as dark circle lines. Those are called shadow lines. So once you stitch the inside of a design, you could move it over and line up on those drawn lines. That takes a little bit of practice, and sometimes it can be overwhelming when you're looking at all of those, but they are extremely helpful. So the fewer the markings, the easier it is to see through the ruler. If your ruler does not have markings that you desire, you can always put a piece of blue tape to mark where you need the mark to be. And I will do that if I'm working on a quilt that has a lot of blocks with the same ruler. I just put a piece of blue tape on my ruler, and then I don't have to be hunting for the line as I go. Too many marks can hinder your creativity. It can be overwhelming, and then you don't use your ruler. But on the other hand, lots of markings help you to identify seam lines, points, and corners to help keep designs straight and level. Shadow designs, like for example, the Amanda Murphy circle ruler that I showed you with those circles, allows you to place your ruler over previously stitched designs to help them keep lined up and in the proper order. Tape. In this picture, this would be an example of, in the background, that was the Amanda Murphy panel I was doing some practice on. And because the thread I used doesn't show up that well with all of the different colors, I used a piece of painter's tape on my clamshell to help me identify where a seam line was. It also can help hold your ruler pieces together. So I always have a roll of this in my stash. Again, back to this example, that blue tape there is holding the pieces together so that when I'm pushing everything, it all goes as one. Here's an example of a photo of the blue tape that is holding the pieces together as well. You'd pull out the pieces you weren't going to use. If you're storing nested circles, unless you have a separate bag for them and you want them to be in that one big shape, keeping that blue tape on them helps keep them together. And when it comes to rulers, we're going to talk about some of the tips and tricks here pretty quick, but a ruler can slip. You know, the BERNINA rulers now come with a nice tacky, it's almost like a silicone feel. Maybe it is a silicone coating, but when you put it on your fabric, it wants to stay there. It doesn't slip and slide. If you have some of the older rulers that do slip and slide, or you have some that you like, but that is a problem for you, there is a product out that I do like. It's called Grippy, and it's in a spray can. And when you spritz the back of your ruler, it does not make it sticky in any way. It gives that light rubbery feel. I guess I would call it rubbery. You could also use True Grips on the back. Those work really well. I would hesitate to use sandpaper or anything that is super scratchy, because you can scratch whether you're using a domestic machine and you have one of those nice clear tables that go onto yours, or your BERNINA tray table, or if you have a sit-down long arm, I don't want to scratch that up. So I would hesitate to use that, especially since this is a really great product. You can also use it on your rotary cutting rulers. I have done that. I have some that are my favorite, but they're just too slippery. What else do I use? Gloves. I tend to use just one glove, and I use it on my dominant hand. you can play with that and figure out what works best for you. I was lucky enough to run into someone at a quilt show who taught me that a glove should be tight on your hand, and so that you don't have that movement going on. So my current pair are the grabberoos you see right there. I've also used machine ingers. I've seen some that have part of the hand missing, and I know that those are highly rated as well. Having a glove and having rulers that don't slip are going to make your whole sewing experience a whole lot more fun and enjoyable. So one of the first things that I do is I have to have a map of what I'm going to do. And so I might need to do extensive markings like this, or I might just need a few markings. Here, the photo on the left shows the marking tools that are my favorite. The bottom is a sew line. It's a water soluble, but it's a ballpoint pen. Love it. The next one is the utensil I use to mark what you're seeing right here. It is the white pencil sew line. Then I've got the blue water-soluble marker, which I love for just marking like the center points of designs. And then I have another sew line marking pencil that I have yellow, the yellow lead in. So those are my four. I also do have, you know, the thicker chalk markers, but I tend to go to these four all the time. And above, you can see my marks down the center of the borders here, keeping in mind that I did take into consideration, we're going to talk about the 1/4 inch. You know, if you're going to bind something, just like when you piece and you add a 1/4 inch, you have to keep in mind that the center really is a 1/4 inch closer to the inside. So a ruler foot is a 1/2 inch wide. I don't know if you know that. I did not know that. So we need to think about that when we're stitching. If the needle's in the middle of the foot, that means we're always stitching 1/4 inch away from where the ruler is. So even if your ruler goes corner to corner, that is not where your stitching is going to line up. You either have to learn how to eyeball a 1/4 inch or use a measuring tool, and I'll show that to you in my next slide. Also keep in mind that because the foot is 1/2 inch, the actual edge of the foot is a 1/4 inch. So when you're stitching to the front of something or to the side, when the edge of the foot hits your seam, you are 1/4 inch away. Very important in ruler work. You can stitch 360 degrees around the ruler. So that ruler can go any direction around that foot. Having said that, many find 1 or 2 ways that work the best. So you have to practice and figure that out. Like I am dominantly with my left hand. I can do the right hand, but you're going to find that sometimes pulling the quilt towards you is easier, pushing it away, being at an angle. To me, it's more difficult for a ruler to be behind and try to be moving. But we're all different, and I'm left-handed, so what works for me might not be the same as what works for you. So practice. Support the weight of your quilt on the table. So you're going to have to be able to move the quilt and the ruler and keep everything tight up against the foot. So if you have all that weight hanging down in your lap, it's going to be very difficult to control that. So maneuver the quilt however you need to for your setup so that the majority of the quilt is not hanging down off of the table. Keep your hands close in. If you have your hands far apart, they are more likely to drift away from the ruler. You're more likely to drift away from the foot with your ruler and lose control. So you don't want your hands way out in front of you. You don't want to try to stretch as far as you can stretch. You want to stop and start. And lastly, use thread that matches your background fabric and is a lighter weight. Until you get proficient, or unless you really want something to stand out, I am going to try to match my background fabric, and I'm going to be in the 60 to 80 weight thread department. Here are two tools. There are other options available. The first is the Dritz measuring tool, and it helps you identify quarter, 3/8, 5/8, and half-inch markings. The photo on the right is the new Amanda Murphy tool, and it has 1/8, 1/4, and 1/2 inch. So it's kind of like a stylus. You can hold it in your hand, and when you're coming up on something, if you need to adjust your ruler to figure out where a 1/4 inch is, that's a very nice tool to use. So what's the best practice for the Q series settings? When we're going to start sewing, there are a couple things we want to keep in mind. The mode. And BSR mode, or Bernina Stitch Regulator mode number 2, is the recommended regulation mode for Rulerwork. It's not wrong to use BSR mode 1. It's just that in BSR mode 2, there's a lot of stopping and starting as you reposition your hands. So in BSR mode 1, the needle continues to idle, even if you stop moving your hands. So that is the reason, if you're ever wondering why they're recommending BSR mode 2, it's for that reason. If you have a needlepoint laser light on your Q series, have it on, have it aligned, and I usually leave mine in the eye mode or always on mode, because it's really helpful for you to eyeball where you're going to start and stop. In ruler work, whether you're on a domestic or regular or long arm, I'm always going to stop in the needle down position. When I stop and start, which is frequently, I want to lock myself in to the position that I need to be in as I reposition my hands and then continue on. I have my foot pedal programmed to the knot function. And for those of you who might not have a Bernina Q series, what the knot feature does is bring your bobbin thread to the top. So one tap of the heel, everything comes up and you're good to go. You don't need to move your hands or take your hands off of your project. If you happen to be sewing on a domestic, there are a few things that I do if I happen to be free motioning on a domestic machine. I know that I need to slightly increase my stitch length. You might need to decrease, just depending on how fast or slow you stitch. My goal is to get consistent stitches, and without stitch regulation, you now have to be in control of your movement and your foot, how hard you're pushing your foot on the gas. You will have to lower your feed dogs. You're going to have to use the right Rulerwork foot for your machine. So, you know, I know there's high shank and low shank. So just be sure if you're not sewing on a Bernina that you use the proper foot for your machine. And then again, you have to control the speed of the foot control. So without stitch regulation, the harder you push on the gas pedal, the faster you're going to go. And so you have to keep that, maintain that balance. But you do want to have your machine programmed to always stop in the needle down position. So that's what I do to get my machine set up and ready to go. And now let's talk about sewing with a long arm ruler. Rulers always have to be away from your presser foot. So when you're lowering your presser foot, the ruler should not be anywhere near your foot, because if your foot comes down onto your ruler, you are putting pressure on your needle bar and you could cause some damage to your machine. So the rule is no ruler anywhere near. You're going to put your quilt underneath your needle where you want to begin your stitching. Maybe you have marked already or you know where you're going. You're going to bring your bobbin thread up and take a few stitches and tie off. Using BSR mode 2 when possible. If not, whatever settings you need to use for your machine, you are going to have to keep the ruler snugged up to the edge of the foot, using your gloves to help control both the ruler and the quilt and keeping it up against the foot. You want to stop frequently, stitch a little bit, stop, reposition your hands and continue going. And go slowly. This is not a race. I find it quite enjoyable. Small mistakes disappear into the whole. So little things really go completely away. So have fun and practice. Really, I'd start with a straight ruler, and the softer the curve, the easier it will be when you start. those little tiny sharp curves require a lot more control that you will build over time. So here I have the ruler snugged up against the foot, and I'm using the ruler as an edge, as a guide. So when I start stitching, I'm going to have my palm on my quilt top, fingers on the ruler. You can't see my other hand right now because I'm holding the camera trying to take that photo. But I would have both hands on the ruler and the quilt, and I'm pushing everything at the same time. Sometimes I just have my fingertips on. Sometimes, as in the clamshell, the BERNINA clamshell, if there's a lot of place for my hand to go, I might have a lot of hand on a ruler. I'm placing my fingertips a comfortable distance apart. And as I'm going, so in this photo right here, I might stop at the midway point and reposition my hands and then finish the curve. So stopping in the needle down position, and I make small movements. I mean, you'll be able to tell as you start going how far you can go before you are starting to lose control. And we haven't talked about pressure, but you want to use, it's a fine line. You want to use just the right amount of pressure to maintain control and stay tight up against the foot. But if you put a lot of pressure down, you're fighting against yourself, and it's very difficult. And sometimes you can actually hear your machine squeak as the ruler is riding along the side of the foot. So the least amount of pressure you need. Here's a photo I included just to show that that ruler can go behind the foot. The ruler can go 360 degrees. So any angle that you need to go on your quilt, you are able to do by positioning that ruler anywhere you need. So there can be problems. As I mentioned, the smaller the ruler or curve, the harder it is to stay snugged up. So don't, first crack out of the barrel, little tiny things are difficult to handle. Soft movements, curves are much easier. Also, like the nested ovals and the nested circles, where you have more ruler to put your hand. Maintaining control and weight of the quilt weight. As your quilt slides into your lap and now you're trying to maneuver everything as you go, you're going to drift off. Keeping the ruler flat. So a ruler, when it does this, could slide underneath your needle and you could strike it. I mean, that is the biggest, I don't want to call it a fear, but it's the thing that you need to be the most careful of, that you are maintaining control and keeping the ruler flat to the table, and that it's not coming up or going down if you are on a frame. The other problem is you're forgetting that you're stitching a 1/4 inch away from the ruler. So you think you're going to go from corner to corner and you really wind up a 1/4 inch off the mark. Pushing down so hard your shoulders and hands hurt. Drifting away from the ruler. Slippage of the ruler. And here are my oopsies that I'm going to show you in my project. On the right-hand side, in that small red rectangle, I was not paying attention and thought I had the ruler tight up against, and then I realized, oh, I don't have the ruler tight up against, and so I regained control. On the left, the large rectangle, I was stitching too far away from me, and my ruler slid. I didn't keep my markings lined up, and it slid to the left, and so what will happen. I did not pull those out of my sample, and you'd have a hard time finding them now. It's just when you first start quilting something, these are the things that are most likely going to happen. So again, I'm just showing this one more time to show that I've used a feather ruler on the top, the ribbon candy. I really like this rope effect on the right-hand side. Love that captured rope. The triangles are just a straight ruler that I just pivot and kept 1/4 inch away. And then the inside of this windmill block is just the inside curve. I call it the apple core or the multi-curve ruler. And here is a sample that is primarily all free motion, but I'm showing this to you because the circle of the wreath started with a ruler. I stitched around a ruler before I did everything else free motion. And here also is another example of using a ruler to create a shape, and then you can fill in around it. So if you like doing ruler work and free motion, you can combine them. So now I am going to have Randy bring up the short video of me quilting with the new BERNINA cable ruler. I think once you see it and see how easy it is, you're going to have it. And then you can ask some questions.
Okay, Donna, we got a couple of questions in here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One question is there a special trick to getting the echo clips to attach to the 72 foot? Mine clips, it just doesn't seem to fit.
So with the clips, try it. You know, the etched markings should be face down on the table. And if you have a little red screwdriver, or if you have like the one that comes with the walking foot in your kit, if you just put that to kind of wedge it open just a little bit, so it has to be a really tight fit so it doesn't come off. I understand your pain.
Another one is, could you please talk to us about how to hold the ruler? The rulers keep slipping when I work.
Okay, so if you have a ruler that has a slippery back, put some grippy on it. And then the other thing would be if to wear a glove on one or both hands. That is the big thing. And then, you know, I don't know if you can see me or not, but having your hands way out away from you will not work. You need to stay in closer and stop more frequently. So you might only be stitching 3 or 4 inches, and you're going to stop in the needle down position, reposition yourself to maintain control. When your hands get too far away from you, the ruler is going to slip off to the side.
Okay, another question is how often must you apply grippy to the rulers?
I've only done it once on the rulers I have, so I have not you know, the first time I did it, I was a little bit worried, like, oh, is this gonna work? So I spritzed it super, super light, and then I put just a little bit more on, but it's not a reapply thing. I think it's a one and done.
Another question is how do you hold the ruler on long arms?
I'm going to assume the question is on the frame. Because what I just did is for the sit down, but on the frame, I have a frame model, so there's a base. I'm holding the ruler with one hand. I get one handlebar out of the way. I'm holding the ruler with one hand, and I have to use my other hand to push. So in the big difference is you're pushing the machine, right, versus pushing the quilt, which is the sit down. So on a frame, it's just one hand holding the ruler and the other hand pushing the machine, stopping, repositioning.
Okay, so the next question is how do you set the right height with the adjustable foot?
Okay, that's a very good question. And I'm going to assume we're talking about the sit down long arm or the domestic. I tend to use the 96 when I am on my frame. So I bring it all the way down. And before I even start stitching, I bring a ruler up and I start moving. If there's any resistance and drag, it needs to come up a little. But if it's up, and so you dial it up a little, but if you see distance between there, like more than like a thick business card worth, then you're getting too high, and you'll know you're too high if you skip, if you like have trouble bringing up your bobbin thread or you skip stitches.
Next question is it realistic for me to use rulers to quilt my first quilt top? It has curves. I'm willing to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. You know what, if you're doing, if a clamshell will work, to me, that is a very easy way to start, or a simple, you know, a larger circle. Yeah, I think that would be great. A lot of women will do that before they'll do free motion.
Another question is I have been using the 96 foot exclusively on my new long arm successfully. I don't understand the advantage of the 72S foot other than the slit. Will Bernina make a 96 foot with a slit?
Oh, that's a good question. That is a very good question. I will have to look into that. You know, the 96 foot came out before the 72 did. So at first, in order to get stitch regulation and ruler work, that was Bernina's first foot. So then they came out with the 72 foot so that it could go, so that the people that had a domestic Bernina could also do ruler work. And so because the feet interchange back and forth, that's why the 72 is available. The slit is fabulous because I will use that one. I exclusively use my 96 foot when I'm doing computer work on my frame model. But if I'm going to do like the last photos I showed between ruler work and free motion, I do use the 72S because I don't have to cut the thread to put the new foot on.
Okay, next question is what is a good ruler for beginners?
Well, you absolutely need the straight ruler. And I like the Bernina straight ruler because the edge of the straight ruler is also a single clamshell. So having a clamshell or a set of circles or curves, for me, whether you're a beginner or if you're someone like me who does a lot, having those shapes to choose from, it's like you can never have enough curves and circles, in my opinion, and they're easy. So the Bernina Wave, that the basic set that has the straight ruler and the wave and circles is like a huge a huge asset to your collection.
Next question is, do you use a glove when using rulers on your long arm?
I do not use a glove when I am doing it on my frame model, my stand-up long arm. I always use one on my sit-down one.
That's all the questions that we have, Donna.
Okay, wonderful. It's been fun having this morning together.
And I would like to say again, the webinar is recorded, and we will send out an email once it's ready. And thank you for all the questions, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.